200 warriors surrounded the cabin before sunrise. Royce Barrett woke to the sound of horses breathing in the cold air and the weight of eyes pressing through the wooden walls. He had lived alone in these lands for 3 years, and in that time he had learned to sleep light. But this morning something felt different. Not just the number of men outside, not just the silence that felt like a held breath. It was the way one set of eyes refused to look away, even when all the others scanned for weakness, searched for fear, measured him like prey. He moved to the window. Through the narrow gap in the wood, he saw them. Rows of warriors on horseback, faces painted, weapons ready. At the center stood an older man with silver streaking through his dark hair, his posture carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to be spoken, the chief. And beside him, a woman. She wore traditional clothing, leather and beads woven into her long black hair. Her face was unreadable to everyone else, but when her eyes found his through that sliver of space, something passed between them that had no name yet. Recognition, not the kind that comes from a single glance, the kind that burrows deep and refuses to be forgotten. Royce's hand moved to his ribs without thinking, to the scar that ran along his left side. For months ago, the ravine, the animals circling, a woman alone, injured, trying to fight them off with nothing but a broken branch. He had fired twice, driven them back, carried her to shelter. She had never told him her name, never explained why she was so far from her people. When she was strong enough to walk, she left. Before dawn, he had found only a single beaded cord where she had been lying, still warm from her wrist. Now she stood among 200 men who had come to kill him, and her eyes held a truth she couldn't speak. She knew him, and she couldn't let anyone else know that she did. Neshoba, the chief, raised his hand. The silence deepened. When he spoke, his voice carried across the clearing like a blade, drawn slowly from its sheath. The men who took our lands lived in places like this alone, hidden, thinking distance would protect them from what they stole. Royce didn't move. He knew better than to show fear, knew better than to reach for the rifle leaning against the wall. One wrong move, and this ended before it began. You will come out. You will answer for what was taken. If you are innocent, you will speak. If you are guilty, you will pay. The woman's eyes never left him. There was something in her expression that didn't match the hostility surrounding her. Not sympathy, not mercy, something closer to warning, or maybe desperation. Her right hand moved slightly, fingers brushing the beads in her hair, a gesture so small that no one else would notice, but Royce saw it and he understood. She was asking him not to say he knew her. The door to his cabin felt heavier than it should have when he pushed it open. Sunlight hit his face, harsh and unforgiving. 200 warriors stared at him, 200 weapons ready to end him if he gave them reason. But only one person in that crowd knew the truth about who he was, and she was the daughter of the man who had come to deliver justice. Royce stepped into the clearing, hands visible, posture steady. He met Neshoba's eyes first. Then, for just a fraction of a second, he let his gaze slide to her. Kiona. He didn't know her name yet, but he would. And when this moment passed, when the truth came out, in whatever brutal way it was going to, he knew one thing for certain. Everything was about to change, and neither of them could stop it. But what Royce didn't see was the group of armed men watching from the ridge above. Men who had been tracking the tribe for days, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. Neshoba studied him the way a hunter studies prey, looking for the weakness that would justify what came next. Royce kept his breathing steady, his hands loose at his sides. He had been in tight situations before, but never with 200 reasons to die and only one reason to hope he might live. You live on land that does not belong to you, Neshoba said, his voice cutting through the morning air. Men like you came before. They promised respect. They promised to leave our hunting grounds untouched. They lied. Royce wanted to say he had nothing to do with those men. Wanted to explain that he had chosen this isolated place precisely because no one else wanted it. But words felt useless when surrounded by that much anger, that much history of betrayal. I came here alone, Roy said, keeping his voice level. I've taken nothing that wasn't already abandoned. I hunt only what I need. I've seen no one from your tribe until today. It wasn't entirely true. He had seen Kiona, and she had seen him in a moment that neither of them could acknowledge now. One of the younger warriors moved his horse forward, his face tight with rage. He lies. All of them lie. We should end this now. Neshoba raised his hand again, and the young warrior stopped, but the tension had shifted. It was thicker now, more dangerous. Royce could feel how close this was to tipping into violence. Kiona's eyes flashed toward the young warrior, then back to Royce. There was something desperate in that look now. She shifted her weight slightly, and Royce noticed the way her hand moved to her side, where he knew the scar from. The animal attack would be. For months ago, she had been bleeding her, breathing shallow, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. He had torn fabric from his own shirt to bind the wound, had carried her for miles to shelter. Now she stood among her people, silent, and still unable to say the one thing that might save him. My father asks you a question, Kiona said suddenly, her voice steady but edged with something only Royce could detect. You say you hunt only what you need. Then why do you remain in a place where others have caused so much pain? It was the first time he heard her voice in months. The same voice that had whispered thank you. In the darkness of that shelter before, she disappeared. Royce met her eyes directly because sometimes the only way to prove you're different is to stay. When everyone else runs, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Again, but this time it came with a warning. Her fingers moved subtly. The same gesture from before. Don't say more. Don't reveal what you know. Neshoba dismounted. The sound of his boots hitting the ground felt like a countdown. He walked toward Royce, slowly, deliberately. When he was close enough to see every detail of Royce's face, he stopped. You speak of staying, of proving difference. But words are cheap when land is stolen and blood is spilled. I haven't spilled any blood, Royce said. Not yet, Neshoba replied. But the men who watch us from the ridge above might force that to change. Royce's stomach dropped. Neshoba knew about the men on the hill, which meant this wasn't just about Royce. This was about something bigger, something that had drawn everyone to this exact spot at this exact moment. And whatever was about to happen, it was going to pull Roy and Kona into a situation where their secret would either save them or destroy them both. The young warrior who had spoken earlier suddenly pointed toward the ridge. They're moving. The men on the ridge were not trying to hide anymore. Royce counted 6 of them, maybe 7, moving down the slope with rifles in hand. They wore dust-covered clothes and had the look of people who made their living taking what others couldn't protect. Land grabbers, the kind who followed tribal movements, waiting for moments of distraction to strike. Neshoba turned to his warriors, his voice sharp and commanding. Form a line. Protect the horses. But the land grabbers were already spreading out, flanking them from 2 sides. They had planned this, waited for the tribe to focus all their attention on Royce, then moved in when everyone was exposed. One of the men shouted from the ridge, his voice carrying across the distance. We're here for the land deeds. Noba, hand them over, and we let everyone ride out. Make this difficult, and we burn everything. Royce's mind raced. Land, deeds, that's what this was really about. Not justice for stolen territory, not vengeance against settlers. The tribe had legal documents proving ownership, and these men wanted to destroy them. Nishoba's jaw tightened. He didn't respond to the demand. Instead, he glanced at Kiona, and something passed between them. A silent understanding. She nodded once, then moved toward the group of horses where several leather pouches hung from saddles. The land grabbers saw the movement. 3 of them shifted there, aimed toward her. Royce didn't think. He moved. He crossed the distance between himself and Kiona in 4 strides, putting his body between her and the rifles. It was instinct, the same instinct that had made him pull her from the ravine 4 months ago when she was bleeding and alone. The same instinct that told him some things mattered more than survival. Nishoba saw it. Every warrior saw it. The way Royce had moved, without hesitation, to shield the chief's daughter from danger. It wasn't the action of a stranger. It was the action of someone who knew exactly what he was protecting. Kiona's eyes met his wide and filled with something between gratitude and terror. She knew what he had just revealed, knew that his instinct had betrayed the secret they both needed to keep. "Get down," Royce said quietly, his voice only for her. She dropped to a crouch behind him. Her hand briefly touched his back, a fleeting contact that carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. The land grabber laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the surrounding rocks. "Well, look at that. The settler's got himself a reason to fight. Makes this more interesting." Nishoba's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You protect her." It wasn't a question. It was an observation that changed everything. Royce kept his eyes on the men advancing down the slope. "I protect anyone who doesn't deserve to die for someone else's greed." "Noble words," Nishoba said, "but words won't stop." Bullets. One of the land grabbers fired. A warning shot. It hit the ground 3 feet from where Royce stood, kicking up dust and dirt. The message was clear. The next one wouldn't miss. Kiona's hand was still pressed against Royce's back. He could feel her breathing fast and shallow, could feel the fear she was trying to hide from her people. "There's a dry riverbed behind the cabin," she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear. 20 paces east, deep enough for cover. He didn't ask how she knew about his land, didn't ask why she had been close enough to his cabin 4 months ago to need his help. There would be time for those questions later, if they survived. You follow," Royce said. "My father, your father, is about to have a war on his hands. And if those deeds burn, your people lose everything." Another shot rang out. This one was closer. Royce grabbed Kiona's wrist and pulled her toward the cabin. Gunfire erupted behind them, the warriors returning fire at the land grabbers who were now charging down the slope. Nishoba's voice rose above the chaos, directing his men with the precision of someone who had led through worse. They reached the cabin wall just as another bullet tore through the wood. Above their heads, Royce pressed Kiona against the rough timber, his body shielding hers, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could smell the sage and smoke in her hair, could feel her rapid breathing against his chest. "The riverbed," she said urgently. "We need to get the deeds to safety before they reach the horses." "Where are they?" "Leather pouch, brown with red stitching. On my father's horse." Royce looked around the edge of the cabin. Nishoba's horse was 30 paces away, surrounded by warriors fighting to hold the line. The land grabbers had split into 2 groups, trying to flank them from both sides. It was tactical, professional. These weren't just opportunists. They had done this before. "I'll get them," Royce said. Kiona grabbed his arm. "You'll be killed. Your father's men are occupied. If those documents burn, this was all for nothing." Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. For a moment, she looked exactly as she had 4 months ago when he found her in that ravine, vulnerable and fighting to stay strong. "You don't owe us anything." Maybe not, Roy said, meeting her eyes. But I owe you. He moved before she could argue, kept low, using the cabin and the scattered rocks. For cover, a bullet winded past his ear. Another kicked up dirt at his feet, but he kept moving. His focus narrowed, too. That single horse, that single pouch. That meant everything to these people. He reached the animal, grabbed the reins to steady it, and pulled the leather pouch free. The stitching was exactly as Kiona described. He could feel the weight of papers inside, documents that proved ownership that gave her people legal standing against men who only understood force. One of the land grabbers saw him, raised his rifle. Royce dove behind the horse as the shot rang out. The animal reared, panicked, and for a second Royce lost his balance, but a hand caught his shoulder, steadied him. Noba, the chief, stood beside him, his own rifle, raised, his face hard and unreadable. You risk your life for papers you cannot read. I risk my life because it's the right thing to do, Royce said. Neshoba fired twice, dropping one of the advancing land grabbers. Then he looked at Royce with an expression that carried decades of betrayal and mistrust. She told me what you did 4 months ago, when she returned with her wound bound and fever burning through her body. She told me a man with no tribe helped her, when he had every reason not to. Royce said nothing. There was nothing to say. That wouldn't make this moment more complicated than it already was. I did not believe her, Neshoba continued. I thought she had been confused by pain and sickness, but when I saw you move to protect her without thinking, I understood. You were that man. Another volley of gunfire. 2 more warriors went down, injured but alive. The land grabbers were getting closer, their confidence growing with each step. Get those documents to the riverbed, Neshoba ordered. My daughter will show you where to hide them. And when this is over, you and I will speak about what happens next. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a chance. And right now, that was more than Royce had any right to expect. He ran back toward where Kiona waited, the pouch clutched tight against his chest. She saw him coming and started moving toward the eastern edge of the property. Behind them, the battle intensified. The riverbed was deeper than Royce expected, carved out by years of seasonal flooding. Kiona led him down a narrow path where the walls rose high enough to hide them from view. The sounds of battle became muffled, distant. For the first time since sunrise, they could hear each other breathe. Kiona took the pouch from him and tucked it into a crevice in the rock wall, covering it with loose stones. Her hands were steady, but Royce noticed the slight tremor in her shoulders. The fear she had been holding back for hours was finally showing. Your father knows, Royce said quietly. He's known for weeks, Kiona replied, not looking at him. I tried to hide it. Tried to pretend I had been alone when the animals attacked, but my brothers found tracks. 2 sets, one heavy, one light. They followed them back to your cabin. Why didn't he come for me sooner? She finally turned to face him. In the filtered light of the riverbed, her eyes were darker, more vulnerable. Because I begged him not to. I told him you saved my life when you had no reason to. That you asked for nothing in return. That you let me leave without questions or demands. You don't owe me gratitude, Roy said. I know. She stepped closer. Close. Enough that he could see the thin scar on her collarbone where the animal's claws had torn through skin. But I wanted to understand why. Why a man living alone in these lands would risk everything for someone he didn't know. Maybe I'm tired of being alone. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Kiona's expression shifted, something softening in her features. She reached up slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of his jaw where dirt and sweat had dried. It was the first time she had touched him deliberately, not out of fear or necessity, but out of choice. My father brought 200 warriors here to test you, she said softly. He wanted to see if you were like the others who came before, men who took without asking, who saw our land as empty because we weren't building towns on it. And what did he learn? That you're different. And that difference is dangerous. Royce didn't understand. Dangerous how? Because if our people accept you, if they see that not all settlers are enemies, it challenges everything we've used to survive. The anger, the mistrust, the walls we've built to protect ourselves. Her hand was still against his face, her thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. And if I accept you, I betray the memory of everyone we've lost to men who looked like you. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I know, she whispered, but wanting you feels like I am. The confession settled between them like something too fragile to touch. Royce wanted to close the distance, to kiss her, to prove that what existed between them was stronger than the history, trying to tear them apart. But he didn't move because this moment wasn't about what he wanted. It was about giving her the space to choose. Above them, the gunfire stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. It meant someone had won or someone had retreated. Either way, the balance had shifted. Kiona pulled back, her hand falling away from his face. We need to go back. Wait. Royce caught her wrist gently. Whatever happens up there, whatever your father decides about me, I need you to know something. What? I do it again. Save. You, protect you, all of it. Even knowing it would lead to this. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something she couldn't name. Then she leaned in and pressed her forehead against his. A gesture that felt more intimate than any. Quiche. Then we're both fools, she said. When they climbed back out of the riverbed, they found Noah standing among the bodies of 3 land grabbers. The rest had fled. The warriors were tending to their wounded when Royce and Kiona emerged from the riverbed. 2 men had serious injuries, but would survive. The rest bore only scrapes and bruises. Nshoba stood at the center, his rifle still in hand, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the land grabbers returning. When he saw Kiona, something in his posture softened just slightly, enough for Royce to understand that beneath the chief's hard exterior was a father who had spent hours fearing for his daughter's life. The documents are safe, Kiona said. Nishoba nodded. Once. Then his attention shifted to Royce and the softness disappeared. We need to talk alone. Kiona's hand brushed against Royce's arm, a silent gesture of support or maybe warning. He couldn't tell which, but he followed Nishoba away from the others, toward the Trian, where the morning shadows still clung to the ground. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Nishoba studied Royce, the way someone studies a problem they can't quite solve. Finally, he broke the silence. My daughter has never asked me for anything, not once in her life. She accepts what is given and bears what must be endured. His voice was measured, careful. But when I told her we were coming here to deliver justice, she begged me to spare you. Not with words, with silence, with the way she couldn't meet my eyes. Royce kept his expression neutral. I never asked her to do that. I know, which makes this harder. Nishoba turned to face him fully. You saved her life. That creates a debt. In our culture, such debts are sacred. They cannot be ignored or dismissed. I don't want repayment. What you want is irrelevant. Nishoba's tone sharpened. What matters is what you've done and what it means for my people if I let you walk away without acknowledging it. Royce understood. Then this wasn't just about gratitude or honor. It was about perception. If Nishoba simply let him go, it would look like weakness. Like the chief had been swayed by one act of kindness into forgetting centuries of betrayal. So what do you want from me? Royce asked. Proof, Nishoba said. That you're not like the others. That your help today wasn't strategy or manipulation. That when you look at my Daughter, you see a person, not a conquest. The words hit harder than Royce expected, because there was truth in them. Men had used indigenous women before, traded on their vulnerability, then discarded them when it was convenient. Neshoba had every reason to believe Royce might do the same. I see her, Royce said quietly. I see someone strong enough to survive alone in a ravine with injuries that would have killed most people. Someone who refused help until she had no choice. Someone who came back here knowing what it would cost her and chose to protect me anyway. And Shoba's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of. Honesty when he heard it. The men who attacked us today will return with more, Neshoba said, shifting the conversation. They want our land deeds destroyed so they can claim ownership through force. This cabin, your land, sits on the path they'll use. Royce saw where this was going. You want me to leave? No. Neshoba's answer surprised him. I want you to choose. You can abandon this place and avoid the war that's coming, or you can stay and fight beside us. But if you stay, it's not just for her. It's for all of us. And there's no walking away once that choice is made. It was a test, the kind that had no right answer, only consequences. Stay and risk everything for people who still didn't fully trust him. Leave and prove that his earlier actions were just momentary decency, nothing more. Royce looked back toward where Kiona stood, among the warriors. She was watching them, her face unreadable from this distance, but he knew what she was thinking, knew she was waiting to see what he would choose. He'll stay, Royce said, and Shoba studied him for another long moment. Then he nodded. Then tomorrow, you learn to fight our way. Night fell over the camp. The warriors had established near Royce's cabin. Fires burned low, casting flickering light across faces marked by exhaustion and tension. Tomorrow would bring another fight. Everyone knew it. The land grabbers wouldn't give up after one failed attempt. Roy sat near the edge of the camp, checking his rifle, making sure every part was ready. He had fought before, but never for something that felt this important. Never. Alongside people who had more reasons to mistrust him than accept him. Kiona approached quietly, her footsteps barely audible against the dry earth. She sat beside him without asking permission, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them had changed over the course of the day. It was no longer filled with secrets and caution. Now, it held something else. Possibility. No, you didn't have to stay, she said finally. Yes, I did. She turned to look at him, the firelight catching the angles of her face. Why? You could start over somewhere else, somewhere safer, somewhere without all of this. Royce set the rifle down and met her eyes. Because running doesn't change anything, and because I'm tired of living like the past is the only thing that matters. The past is all we have. Sometimes, Kiona said softly, it's what reminds us who we are, what we've survived. It can also trap you, Royce replied, make you so afraid of repeating old wounds that you can't see when something new is worth a risk. Her hand moved to the beaded cord on her wrist, the one she had been wearing the day he found her. I left this for you. That morning when I disappeared, I wanted you to know I was grateful even if I couldn't say it. I kept it. Royce admitted. It's in my cabin on the window sill where the light hits it every morning. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or the realization that he had been holding on to her memory just as much as she had been holding on to his. My father will expect you to prove yourself tomorrow, she said, her voice quieter. Now he'll put you in the most dangerous position. Test whether you meant what you said about fighting for all of us. I know you could die. I could. Royce reached over and took her hand, the first time he had initiated contact between them. Her fingers were calloused from work, strong and steady, but I'd rather risk dying for something that matters than keep living for nothing. Kiona's breath caught. She looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast of his skin against hers, at the way their fingers fit together like they had been designed for this exact moment. If you survive tomorrow, she said slowly, carefully, what happens then? It was the question that had been hovering between them all day, the one neither of them had dared to ask because the answer required hope, and hope was dangerous when death felt so close. Then we figure out, Royce said. Together, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, her hands still clasped in his. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't a promise, but it was an acknowledgement that whatever existed between them was real enough to fight for. Across the camp, one of the warriors called out a warning. Horses in the distance, too many to be strays. The land grabbers were regrouping, bringing reinforcements. The battle everyone had been preparing for was about to begin, and this time there would be no retreat. The land grabbers came at dawn with 15 men, more rifles, and the confidence of people who believed numbers guaranteed victory. They were wrong. Neshoba had positioned his warriors in a crescent formation around the cabin, using the terrain to force the attackers into a narrow approach where their numbers became a disadvantage. Roy stood at the point where the crescent met the cabin wall, exactly where Neshoba had placed him, the most exposed position, the one that would draw the most fire. It was the test Kiona had warned him about, and Royce knew what it meant. Survive this. Prove his commitment, or detruing. The first wave of gunfire shattered the morning stillness. Royce kept his breathing steady, his aim precise. He dropped 2 men before they could reach cover. The warriors on either side of him fought with a coordination born from years of defending their land against people who saw it as empty. One of the land grabbers broke through the line, charging directly at Royce with a knife drawn. Royce sidestepped the attack, used the man's momentum against him, and sent him sprawling into the dirt. Before the man could recover, one of the younger warriors was there, disarming him with efficiency that spoke of countless similar encounters. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it ended, the land grabbers who survived were retreating into the distance, leaving their weapons and their dead behind. Neshoba's people had won. Not just this fight, but the right to keep their land, to hold on to the documents that proved their ownership. Royce lowered his rifle, his hands shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Blood ran down his left arm where a bullet had grazed him, but the wound was shallow. He would live. Neshoba crossed the clearing toward him, his expression unreadable. When he reached Royce, he placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that carried more weight than any words could. You fought well, Neshoba said simply. You protected what matters. That is how a man earns his place among us. It wasn't just acceptance. It was belonging. Kiona appeared at her father's side, her eyes moving immediately to the blood on Royce's arm. Without a word, she pulled a strip of cloth from her belt and began wrapping his wound. Her hands were gentle but sure, the same hands that had once been too injured to protect herself. You kept your promise, she said quietly, her face close to his as she tied off the bandage. I always keep my promises. She looked up at him, and in that moment, with the morning sun breaking through the clouds and the sound of her people celebrating their victory behind them, something shifted. The fear that had held them both back dissolved. What remained was clear and undeniable. My father has offered you a choice, Kiona said. You can rebuild your cabin here on land that now has protection from our tribe, or you can leave and start fresh somewhere else. What do you want me to do? Royce asked. Her hand moved to his chest, resting over his heart. I want you to stay. Not because you owe us anything. Not because of what you did 4 months ago or what you did today, but because when I look at you, I see someone who chose to stand. We could have run. Someone who sees me as more than what my tribe represents. Royce covered her hand with his. Then I'll stay. I'll rebuild. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Nishoba, who had been standing close enough to hear, nodded once. Then, it's settled. You have earned your place. Here, the land is yours to keep, and my daughter's choice is hers to make. It was more than Royce had hoped for. It was a new beginning built on the foundation of one moment 4 months ago, when he had chosen to help someone who needed it. That choice had led to this. One, and this choice would lead to a life he had never imagined possible. Kiona smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. And in that smile, Royce saw his future. The cabin would be rebuilt, the land would be protected, and the man who had lived alone for so long would never be alone again. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.